だけどこの気持ちはとだけど見たけれど気持ちにとったりまた calling out for you now I'm calling out to you oh また calling out for you yeah I'm calling out for you. Oh. I'm at the corner now. Boy, Among Us. Oh, what's up? Salt, meat, cheese, and salt.
This video is sponsored by Raycon. More about them at the end of the sketch. Hi there. Hello. Pretty nice day, huh? Oh, yeah. Yeah, definitely a good one. Yeah. Hey, something awful could happen. What? Something terrible could happen at any time. Oh. Yeah, I guess it could. What would you do if that happened? I don't know. I guess it depends on the horrible thing. Something to think about. You should think about that. I suppose I should. You could give me some money. What? Money. You could give me some of it. Oh, no thank you. I think you should consider giving me some money, just kind of continuously. Why would I do that? Well, if something awful does happen, I could help you out. How? I could give you some money. But you would need money if something bad happened, right? Sure, but then why don't I keep it for myself? Oh, maybe you wouldn't have enough money to deal with the bad thing if the bad thing was bad enough. But you would? I would, because I'm planning on asking a bunch of people to start giving me money continuously, so I'm gonna be doing pretty well. Okay, but what if nothing bad ever happened? Then I'd just have given you a bunch of money. But what if it does? But what if it doesn't? It might. It might not, though. Could happen, but maybe not. Possibly, though. Possibly not as well, though. But perhaps something bad will happen. But for all we know, it won't. However, it's within the realm of possibility that it would, and also that it wouldn't just as much. Okay, yeah, no, maybe you're right. Maybe nothing bad will happen. That's what I'm saying. But it might, though. That's what I'm saying. Right. So you should start giving me money continuously, probably. Okay, so how would this work, though? Say something bad does happen. Well, you would start giving me money continuously for various hypotheticals, right? Okay. Something bad might happen to your car. You could give me money for that, right? Something awful to your teeth. Something awful to your house. That's where I live there. Then, you know, if something bad happens to one of the things you've been continuously giving me money for, just give me a call. Oh, okay. Yeah, that's easy enough. Yeah. And then I'll decide if I give you money or not. What? Yeah, that'll kind of be up to me. Convince me, you know? What do you mean? Well, I don't trust you. Well, I don't trust you. Well, you're gonna have to. But you don't trust me. No, God, no. All right. Listen, what we're talking about here is peace of mind, you know? You're not gonna have to worry as much about something bad happening, because you'll be covered if it does. That does sound pretty nice. Yeah, it's a nice thing. It's peace of mind. You can't put a price on peace of mind. I guess that's true. Although that's what you're doing, right? Yeah, that's gonna be my whole thing, monetizing your anxiety. Okay. Hi there, hello, it's me, I'm the Adstronaut. I'm out here in ad space to talk to you about Raycon. You know what, when the sun is out, that just makes me want to put on some earbuds and listen to some music. What? And Raycon makes great sound available to everybody, because their wireless earbuds start at about half the price of other premium brands. I'm just trying to understand, when I'm around, that makes you want to put earbuds on. Yeah, I mean, yeah. So you're ignoring me. No, I like music. Wow, okay, all right. Raycon earbuds give you 6 hours of playtime, seamless Bluetooth pairing, more bass, and a nice compact design for a comfortable noise-isolating fit. They also come in a fun range of colors and patterns with a variety of fit options. Maybe I'll ignore you when you come around, see how that makes you feel. Okay, I'm in the middle of something. I'm talking about earbuds into the void. I thought we were close. Raycon was co-founded by Ray J, and it's used by all kinds of celebrities like Snoop Dogg and Melissa Etheridge. Bet you don't ignore them. And hey, you can click the link in the description box or go to buyraycon.com/Ryan George to get 15% off your Raycon purchase. They even have a 45-day free return policy. I will set you on fire. Look, how about I get you some Raycon earbuds too? Would that make you happy? Oh yeah, that would make me happy. Yeah, okay. Okay, good. I love you, son. I love you too, Dad. What?
This burger is so good, oh my god. I got that. You talk about red meat. I charred it on the outside, so it's kind of burnt. It's very smoky in the stove. Then you look in the middle's all nice and pink. Oh, it's so juicy. Charred on the outside, soft on the inside. Such a good burger. Oh my god, and I put it on a pretzel bun. So the pretzel bun is fantastic. Pretzel bun's all nice and salty. I toasted the pretzel bun, and I put shredded cheese on both sides of the bun before I toasted it. So I'm getting a salty grilled cheese pretzel bun with a charred but juicy burger in the middle. And I put burger seasoning on the burger, so I just have like 6 different flavors popping in my mouth. Oh my god. I got the pretzel, I got the salt, I got the cheese, I got the chard from the burger, I got the soft inside of the burger, and I got this burger seasoning. All just competing for dominance in my mouth. Oh my god, it's such a good burger. I could just eat these endlessly, to be honest. $2.50. It's such a good burger. You go to Wendy's, you're paying like $7 for this. For a specialty burger, or for a burger with special flavors on a pretzel bun, it's at least $7. $8 if you include tax. So I'm getting this for literally like a third of the price. It's so good. Royalty-free upbeat hip-hop. Here we go. I love hip-hop music where they don't talk. I don't need the lyrics. I don't need them rapping about how great of a person the rapper is. I just need some beeps and boops. That's all I need. That's what I'm talking about. What music I have bookmarked is they'll sue me if I'm using it in the video or whatever. Ah yeah. Kiwi. Here, you can have the rest of the movie. I'm kidding. That's my bite. She would love it. If I gave her a full burger patty, she would go absolutely nuts. But then what am I gonna eat, you know? What, just gonna have the pretzel one by itself in this burger? Music's nostalgic, even though I never played Bomberman.
Thank you. We'll take a question from upstairs. Please project your voice as there will be no microphone to the lady in the black.
Thank you. So, as you were talking about hierarchy and the relationship that conservatives and liberals have towards it, I was wondering whether that formulation is also a kind of attack on this dude, this Asian dude in the background. It's just like, oh God, please kill me. I came here with my wife and she's just a feminist and I just, please end it all for me. You can totally tell, like, either this dude or the dude below him is like the husband or whatever. And I know, guys,
Or there are some guys who marry like these hardcore feminists or whatever, because you know they like. I mean, who knows, for whatever reason. I'm just gonna positively assume that they like the girl for other aspects of her personality, other than the fact that she's a feminist. Because feminists are crazy. But it's like I wouldn't mind dating a feminist if like she was a cool person otherwise. But some of these feminists like revolve their entire lives around it, so you can't justify that. So, and she does have a wedding ring on, so that's why. So I'm assuming that she's married. Well, it's weird that she's a feminist and getting married. Although one of my feminist high school friends did get married. Why am I talking?
Sovereignty and a kind of tribalism of saying here are these two groups of people and here's how they relate to hierarchy, here are their characteristics.
Well, it would be if I was trying to reduce all the individual variability to that. But to note that people vary across a dimension is not necessarily simultaneously to limit all the variability to those dimensions.
Okay, what the fuck? What was the question? I need a transcript. The guy asked himself better questions than the audience. Please recite.
There's lots of other variability. If I was trying to reduce all the individual variability to that, but to note that people vary across a dimension is not necessarily simultaneously to limit all the variability to those dimensions. There's lots of other variability. And your question to some degree is whether the act of categorization is in itself a limitation on individual freedom. I think.
Okay, so I'm trying to understand everything, because I mean Jordan Peterson brings up very good logical arguments in this very politically correct society we live in. And so basically, okay, so I couldn't hear the question. Maybe I should go back and listen to the question.
Thank you. We'll take a question.
So, as you were talking about hierarchy and the relationship that conservatives and liberals have towards it,
The relationship that liberals and conservatives have towards hierarchy.
I was wondering whether that formulation is also a kind of attack on individual sovereignty.
Would that formulation be an attack on individual sovereignty, meaning that if conservatives and liberals recognize a hierarchy, then would they also, does that categorize people into groups and taking away, sort of the recognition of their individualism, right? Like, I'm not me, I'm not baked Ziti gaming, I'm just an Asian, or I'm just a white male, or whatever, right? So that would be taking away my individual sovereignty, as she puts it.
And a kind of tribalism of saying here are these two groups of people and here's how they relate to hierarchy, here are their characteristics.
So she's comparing it to tribalism, where people are categorized into groups. So here are these two groups of people,
Well, it would be if I was trying to reduce all the individual variability to that. But to note that people vary across a dimension is not necessarily simultaneously to limit all the variability to those dimensions.
Saying that, because I'm trying to process this in my own head. Because he's just spouting words and I can just listen to hear, nonchalantly and then just clap in agreeance or whatever, right? But I'm not going to. So he's saying, yeah, that would be true if he was trying to limit. If he was trying to, what did he say?
To that. Well, it would be if I was trying to reduce all the individual variability to that.
Individual variability, right? He would say, you know, your question would be correct if he was trying to reduce individual variability. If he was trying to say that people in a certain group can only act in the way of that group, right? He's saying, oh, only white guys can act like this, or oh, only black guys can act, or only black people can, or black people can only act in this way, or, you know, oh, all Asians are smart, or all, you know, all like Mexicans hop the border or whatever, right? He's saying that if he was doing that, then her question on whether or not his argument attacks individual sovereignty would be correct, but
to note that people vary across a dimension is not necessarily simultaneously to limit all the variability to those dimensions.
He's saying that people vary. He's saying that people are different beyond He's saying that people are different. He's saying that just because he believes that people in a group can have differences amongst themselves, can be different people among themselves, doesn't necessarily mean that only people in that group have those differences or have those similarities, right? If you're saying like, oh, some white people like mayonnaise and some white people like ketchup, right? He's saying he recognizes that, but he's not saying that people that you know, white people can only like mayonnaise or ketchup, or that only white people can like mayonnaise and ketchup, right? He's not saying that, which is what which is what the asker of the question was suggesting, I guess. I don't know if that makes sense, but he's using very high vocabulary words in a very specific way, to where it's a condensed message, and you have to either understand that message or you have to unpack it. And we're only 40 seconds into the video, right? But he's saying that he's using vocabulary words and terminology that you wouldn't find in normal speech, and so therefore he sounds really smart because you can't understand what he's saying. But what he's saying, so you need to unpack it in order to understand, which is what I'm trying to do here, because I need to, right? If I was watching this video, I would replay these first 40 seconds 4 or 5 times, trying to understand what he's saying or whatever. Because saying, you know, oh, the variability of the individual amongst, you know, different dimensions or whatever, he shouldn't be using the term dimensions. He should be using the term of categorical groups or something like that, right? But he's using the word dimensions to sound really fancy, and this is kind of some of the rap that Jordan Peterson gets, who is this guy, by the way, is that he makes himself sound smarter than the ideas that he is communicating are. So, and when you have a big cult following like this, as a leader, you kind of need to do that, because then the people in his group, you know, Jordan Peterson fans, can say, like, because this guy's really popular among, you know, conservatives or whatever, among the new age conservatives, that would be like my generation, right? Like, because I liked this guy, or I liked him or whatever, right? I thought when he started out, he was, you know, fantastic, and he was saying things that no one else was saying, you know, whatever, right? But if you're in his in-group or whatever, if you're one of his followers, then you can you can say like, oh yeah, I understand everything Jordan Peterson is saying. You're just, if you don't agree with him, you're just too dumb to understand how smart he is. Or you're too dumb to understand the things that he's saying or whatever. And I don't like, I'm not saying everyone who's a fan of his says that, but I'm sure there are some people, especially from the way that he projects himself, with how he speaks, or the high level vocabulary that he uses. He's trying to sound smart. And I personally, I have a problem with people trying to sound smarter than they need to, because then their message doesn't get understood by the general audience, right? And then if it's not understood, if your message can only be understood by the people who follow you, then whatever you're saying just becomes a circle jerk, right? It just becomes, oh, haha, we agree with each other, sort of thing. And I hate that because it doesn't allow any room for expansion. It doesn't allow any room for like, oh, we can convince other people, right? Because he's not, by having his messages so encrypted, with having his sentences so advanced that the normal person needs to sit here and analyze it and can't even like understand what the heck he's saying. He's blocking opportunity for the average viewer to agree with him. Because there could be some person out there with like a 90 IQ who would agree with his messages, with his ideals, but who just simply can't understand what the heck he's saying. So, that is one of the qualities of a leader, though, is that you are smarter than the people who follow you, because you need to be smarter, because the people who are following you need to follow someone who's smarter than themselves. That makes sense. But I don't think that you should necessarily do that by projecting, by expressing yourself in a way that can't be understood by others. So, if I show this video to some random person on the street who knows English, they should be able to understand what he's saying, but they can't. And then you look at like a presidential debate and they'll do something similar, right? They'll speak in ways that make them sound smart. When they actually talk about their policies, they'll make themselves sound smart without needing the audience to understand what they're saying, because all they're trying to do is seem smart. Oh, this guy seems like he has good ideas. What are those ideas? I don't know. But it just seems like he has good ones, right? When you're saying something like that, what are you agreeing with, right? And especially if you follow this person, right? If someone watches this video, says, I agree with Jordan Peterson in this video, but then doesn't understand what he said, well, you don't know what you're agreeing to. What if it was something bad? What if he's suggesting, yeah, racism should exist? Or what if he was suggesting like, oh, like something bad or whatever, right? It sounds like he's not, but he could be. And so being able to take apart his ideas and understand what he's saying and taking that message or whatever is definitely, I think it's necessary. I personally want to understand. It's only 40 seconds and I'm ranting about something else. There are some people who could listen to these 40 seconds and understand him perfectly the first try, and that's fine. right? I'm not smart enough to do that because I don't speak the same language that he does, right? I don't think about my ideas with the terminology that he uses. I think about these same ideas, but just in a different way. And so being able to sit here and listen to a sentence that he says, and being able to dissect it in a way that I understand it, because he and I could have the same idea, but we think about it differently. And so when we communicate with each other, right, like if I ever met Jordan Peterson in person, I asked him a question, then would I be able to understand his answer? And would I be able to nod my head yes and agree with it? Or would I be able to respond to it in disagreement? It depends if we're on the same wavelength. And that's what I'm really trying to, solve here. And so if I spend 5 minutes trying to dissect one sentence that he says, then we're not on the same wavelength yet or whatever. So, I don't know. I derive joy in understanding ideas. So, and being able to explain them outwardly. So, I had this problem in school where it's not at this level, but a teacher would say something and I wouldn't understand it. He would teach a lesson. I wouldn't really understand what the lesson was about, and then he would give us instructions and I wouldn't understand the instructions. And so that was very problematic for me. And so I had to, even though I was listening, so I had to copy what other people were doing, or I had to get him to to explain things in a slightly different way. And it's not just with me. When I used to teach special ed, these kids would get the same problem. Super smart kids who just had no idea what to do, or had no idea what the lesson was communicating to them, or what the message was, or what the teacher was saying. They wouldn't understand. And so my job, essentially, with these kids was, and they would get upset and frustrated at it or whatever. And so my job with these kids was to listen to the teacher, dissect what she was saying in very much the same manner that I just did with this YouTube video, and then explain it to the kid in a way that he would understand. And then he would be like, I get it, thank you. And that's it's my job to do that. And then the kid would understand what to do. He'd do his work, no problem. He wouldn't get frustrated, he wouldn't get upset, he wouldn't have a behavior. Right, so I did my job, but it was from a place of understanding, because I felt something similar in school, which is why when I got to higher levels of education, like with college, I just couldn't do it. Because these professors speak their own language. And much like Jordan Peterson does. I don't have time to sit there and take apart everything that they're saying. So even though I attended all my lectures in college, I walked away from the class not knowing what the heck was going on. And then if they gave some homework assignment or whatever during that lecture, like, I didn't know, because I can't differentiate, because the language that they're using is too different than mine. So I needed one of my friends to explain it, or I needed like a website to explain it, or whatever. So that was very unfortunate. But that's enough about me. So I've learned to get around that. Right? If I listen to someone like Jordan Peterson, I'm not, obviously, a lot of the things that he said, I'm sure the rest of the video will be easy to understand, but I need a more long, drawn out explanation in idea, with ideas that I am used to, and in a way that I'm used to hearing it, or whatever, right? And that way I can, kind of dissect the message. That's my whole point. I'm not suggesting I'm dumb in a way, but it's not a matter of being smart or dumb. It's a matter of what language do you use. to talk to people? And what language do they use when they are listening to you? Because even though we all speak the same English, it's not words that we're familiar with. That's what it means to be fluent in a language. You're fluent in your own way. You're fluent in a way that you've been exposed to. And this dude obviously doesn't talk in layman's terms, so that's a problem. And you'll get the same, there's the high academic way of speaking, which is what he's doing. There's the normal way of speaking, which is kind of what I'm doing, right? It's, I can speak sentences and you'll understand them, even if I communicate, even if I'm talking about difficult ideas or complex ideas, I'll explain them in a way to where you can at least understand what I'm saying. And then there are kind of below, sort of, I guess I don't like to say below that, but I guess next to that, there are people who talk in really simplistic terms, and where each word has an emotion attached to it, and you basically talk in emotions, essentially. So that's more of like the hood or whatever, like having a lot of in jokes, right? Every single thing that someone says when you go to the hood, or when you go to more of like a low class area, or when you're speaking to someone like of really low intellect, they'll speak more with their emotions than they will with their words. And every single word that they say has an emotion attached to it. And so that's how they communicate ideas, which is completely fine, right? If that's how they understand people talking, and that's how they express themselves, perfectly fine. But I'm obviously not on that wavelength or whatever, right? So I don't know that language either. So it's hard for me to communicate with someone from the hood or someone like that or whatever, because it's all emotion and it's all relatability. And I don't have either with those kind of people, so yeah. But I mean, that's a huge tangent I just got on. I could go on forever, but let's watch the rest of this video. Let's see what he's saying.
There's lots of other variability. And your question, to some degree, is whether the act of categorization is in itself a limitation on individual freedom, I think, if you push your question all the way down to the bottom. And the answer to that is, to some degree, yes, but it's also a precondition for individual freedom. So, is that sufficient?
But you sort of do have...
So basically what he said is, and I mean, he kind of like, the way he tilts his head and the way that the audience laughs suggests that he, and whether it was intentional or not, he overloaded, because I had to sit here and I had to like take, a couple minutes to understand what exactly he was saying. She doesn't get that time. She can't pause the video. So she, the feminist or whatever, basically just got overloaded with a lot of information spoken to her in a way that she doesn't understand. Whereas with her question, even if her question was on the same level as his answer, she probably had this entire seminar, she probably had the past hour to form the question in her head in a condensed and concise way that would be able to be spoken as a question in a single sentence. And Jordan Peterson here, even though she could have taken an hour to prepare her question, to really think about what she wanted to ask, he shot back a higher level response to her instantly. And obviously because he's an academic, right? He's a very intelligent person, or at least he's able to portray himself as a very intelligent person. So, and his response was intentional, it was overly complex to spoken in that higher academic language, to where it was spoken all at once, it's going to overload her with information. And so everyone laughs in the video at her, oh, she's baffled or whatever by his response. But he didn't diss her or anything. He didn't own her. He just answered her question. But the thing is, she's not having enough time to process his answer, which is why I don't like this side. I don't like feminism, right? The whole third wave feminism that's been going on for the past 10 years has been ridiculous. But at the same time, I don't like Jordan Peterson's way of overloading his opponents with information and communicating, albeit correct ideas, in such a way where he's he overloads them with information, and so they don't have time to process everything that he said. Whereas if they had a recording of him speaking the answer to them, and then they were able to play that 5 or 6 times and sit on it for 10 minutes, and then prepare a response, then she would be able to prepare a response. Which I think should be allowed. Because not everyone is as intelligent as Jordan Peterson, and not everyone is so highly academically spoken as him. But the fact that everybody laughs at the fact that he answered her question and she's like baffled at it or whatever, I think it doesn't speak to her wrong ideals, which I think everyone thinks. It just simply speaks to the fact that she herself isn't able to communicate on the same level as he is, and so she's not able to process his answer on the same level that he gave it, as instantly as he gave it. And so of course there's going to be a lot of hesitation there, and of course she's going to need time to pick it apart, and of course her next response to whatever he said is only going to half address what he told her, because she wasn't able to process the whole thing. Whereas we were able to sit here, you guys and I were able to sit here and really like try to understand what he was saying. So, whereas if there's a debate back and forth or whatever, both debaters need to be on the same level. Typically you see in like political debates and stuff, both debaters will have a very high knowledge of politics, or debating anything else or whatever. So someone like who's that girl? She had like the square jaw and everything. She spoke out about her name was like Gretchen or something. She spoke out against like global warming. She was like the poster girl for like, oh, we got global warming awareness and everything like that. She was able to, even though she was in high school, she was able to communicate these very advanced ideas at that age, which is why she was able to go forward, and which is why she was able to speak up and participate in debates and win debates and everything like that. Because she was a very highly intellectual person who was able to communicate these ideas at the same level as other people were able to. This feminist lady obviously isn't at that same level, which is fine, right? How smart or dumb you are isn't about how well you can communicate ideas. It should just be at how you can process those ideas, right? And if it was someone who spoke in the same way that she did, she would be able to respond and do it back and forth or whatever, right? That's why someone like me, I can have a lot of opinions and I can make a lot of counter arguments in a lot of ways or whatever. But the thing is, I need to be prepared to do so, which is why I would never be able to participate in a debate with another person, because I would need too much prep time, right? It would have to be like message by message, which is also why I tend to sound a lot smarter when I'm texting people as opposed to when I'm speaking to them. So, sorry guys, I'm getting a bit sicker. I want to see what his next message was. But guys, I'm done, like, I'll try to keep up with the video, but I'm not going to go on these half-hour long tangents.
Is in itself a limitation on individual freedom, I think, if you push your question all the way down to the bottom. And the answer to that is, to some degree, yes, but it's also a precondition for individual freedom. So...
They're putting the spotlight on her. It didn't seem like he had a complete thought. So basically he's saying that...
ability to those dimensions. There's lots of other variability. And your question, to some degree, is whether the act of categorization is in itself a limitation on individual freedom.
Because the thing is, I would hate to be her. Because I don't mind, having controversial questions and being a devil's advocate. But having to process all of this as it's being spoken to me, it's just like impossible. For me. Right? I'm someone who I need to absorb, I need to listen to something, and then I take a long time to sit on it and really absorb it. And then once I really absorb it, then I can formulate a response in my own words. But basically here he's saying...
categorization is in itself... your question, to some degree, is whether the act of categorization is in itself a limitation on individual freedom.
Is the act of categorization a limitation on individual freedom? So if I call you, if I say you are, oh, you're just an Asian, right? Like if someone says, basically to me, he's an Asian, right? If they categorize me as that, does that put a limitation on my individual freedom? Or...
I think if you push your... is in itself a limitation on individual freedom.
Yeah, is it a limitation on my individual freedom? Am I less of an individual? And I guess in effect, am I limited because other people categorize me as an Asian? Am I not able to do things that white people are able to do, or that black people are able to do, because you have categorized me as an Asian?
I think if you push your question all the way down to the bottom, and the answer to that is, to some degree, yes, but it's also a precondition for individual freedom.
He's saying that, yeah, categorizing people does somewhat take away their freedoms in the way that I just said. But it's also a precondition to individual freedom. Basically saying that if I'm categorized, then yeah, I'm limited in some aspect, but then I'm also but that also enables me to have certain freedoms, to be able to do certain things. Oh, I'm categorized as an Asian, but now I can go and live my life as a person, sort of thing, as like an individual or whatever. He's saying that yes, it does limit, but it also enables you. So that's... Why am I watching this video in the first place? And then that's all he says. That's all he says or whatever. And then she's gonna keep going on. Let's see if she understood. I did make a prediction that she was only going to half understand his question, and so her response is only going to be in half response to what he said.
So, is that sufficient?
But you sort of do have certain predispositions that you're giving in the same way in which people from political correctness are trying to say this is what it means to be a woman, these are the kind of things that it is expected from a woman to do to defend herself. And it seems to me that you are making a similar claim about this is what conservative people do, and this is how they always relate to power.
So she's saying that Jordan Peterson is claiming that there are expectations for people in certain groups. And she's specifically saying men versus women. She's saying that women are expected to do a certain thing, which is what feminism is trying to go against, right? Obviously, right? Feminism is all about female individual freedoms or whatever, which is fine. First wave feminism that started back in like the 20s, or not the 20s, but like the 40s, totally fine, whatever, right? No one's debating that anymore. But she's saying that the categories, the categorization of certain of groups of people, of women specifically, that Jordan Peterson is saying that there's expectations put onto them or whatever.
Well, I don't.
But you sort of do have certain predispositions that you're giving in the same way in which people from political correctness are trying to say this is what it means to be a woman, these are the kind of things that it is expected from a woman to do to defend herself. And it seems to me that you are making a similar claim about this is what conservative people do, and this is how they always relate to hierarchy. This is what conservative people do, and this is how they always relate to hierarchy.
This is what certain people do, and this is how it relates to hierarchy. See, I don't know what she's saying. I didn't watch the full debate because she's obviously addressing things that he said earlier in the seminar. But basically, from what I can gather, she's saying that, she's basically just saying that there are certain expectations and there's a certain predisposition that Jordan Peterson has, where he expects certain categories of people to fit within the hierarchy in a certain place or whatever. Which, that sounds really vague. It sounds like I'm spouting kind of like the end of an idea with that, but that's basically. The fact that she was able to articulate herself and respond to him, though, is very impressive, so I'll give her that.
Well, I would say that I perhaps am doing that, but I don't see how that's the same as what the postmodernists are doing. As far as I can tell, the postmodernists aren't saying that the groups, the individuals within those groups, are characterized by any stable characteristics whatsoever, except for the fact of their comparative oppression. So I don't understand the first part of your argument. Part of the reason the postmodern types of the same. Well, I would.
Okay, so he's gonna go the comparing himself to what other people do or whatever, because he's trying to. Because now he's going on the offensive. Now he's going to claim, with debates that are one-on-one, it wouldn't be like this. But with anytime you argue with a feminist, or a feminist argues, or the fact that it's about feminism and politics, right? Politics specifically. I shouldn't even say feminism. It's politics. Social standings, this sort of stuff. There aren't just two sides. There are all these different groups of people who are all spouting different arguments. And so when you join the fray as a debater, you're trying to differentiate yourself from groups of people that you could be similar to, or groups of people that you're up against or whatever, right? And so an easy argument to say, and it's a really easy argument to say, is to attack the opposition. He's basically, from what I gathered, first time listening, he is basically saying, well, what I'm doing isn't as bad as what the enemy is doing, basically. So, and in this case, it would be feminists. So he's going to say, he's saying postmodernist. I believe a postmodernist. Postmodernism is the intellectual stance or mode of discourse defined by attitude of skepticism on what describes as great narratives. Okay, you didn't speak words there. What is postmodern thinking? Skepticism, subjectivism, or relativism. A general suspicion of reason and an acute sensitivity to the role of ideology in inserting and maintaining political. But, so you're skeptical about it? That seems like a very broad movement. Now you're getting into freaking large-scale population. How things affect each other. If you're looking at media, ugh. It's skepticism. It's something, postmodernism would be something that like I would do, right? Where it wouldn't, you don't, postmodernism, because he's going to say the postmodernists, they're basically skeptics. They're basically saying, I don't know about that sort of thing. Right? Most people typically take things at face value. Right? If you say like, 100 people died in a bombing in Afghanistan, then people are going to take that and they're going to be like, okay, 100 people died in a bombing in Afghanistan. A postmodernist is going to be a little skeptical on that, be a little like, I don't know about that, was it really 100, was it really a bombing, what was the cause of the bombing, right? They're going to look deeper into it, right? They're not just going to believe the headline. And then it could be like, and then you could find a truth about like, it was a planned bombing by America, right? America set up this bombing or whatever, or America trained the guys who defected and then left to start their own radical Islam group that then did the bombing or whatever. So now it's not just like terrorist bombing. It's looking into who's to blame, and then looking into other things like what affects society and whatnot, right? Like a postmodernist, I assume, would be skeptical on feminism, right? Because feminism sounds good on paper, but then it's like, okay, is feminism actually good for society? And then you look at that, and then you look at like, it's just about being skeptical, and it's about questioning everything. That's what a postmodernist would do, I assume. But it doesn't sound like postmodernists can really be grouped as a category of people. At least I wouldn't categorize myself as a postmodernist, because I don't care enough. But I'm still always skeptical about everything that's going on, because it's interesting to be. But I'm not doing it as any kind of statement or whatever. But let's see what he says about postmodernists.
I would say that I perhaps am doing that, but I don't see how that's the same as what the postmodernists are doing.
Yeah. He's admitting to saying that, yeah, he is categorizing people, and then having a specific expectation for those categories of people as to what they're going to act like or whatever, which is, I wouldn't say is necessarily limiting their individual freedom, but I guess it limits what he would perceive as, what kind of individuals there are, right? This guy's very anti-feminist, so he's basically saying like, yeah, he's going to disagree with every feminist, sort of thing, because he disagrees with the majority of them, that he's going to disagree with all of them, because he's categorizing them and he's limiting his own view of feminism to, to whatever he is or whatever, or to the fact that it's something to combat, it's something to go against or whatever. So.
I mean, as far as I can tell, the postmodernists aren't saying that the groups, the individuals within those groups, are characterized by any stable characteristics whatsoever.
The postmodernists aren't saying that groups of people are categorized by anything. So postmodernists aren't saying that, all Asians are smart, or all black people are dumb, or, whatever stereotypes there are, right? Or that all white people are good or evil or whatever, right?
Except for the fact of their comparative oppression. So I don't understand the first part of your argument. I mean, part of the reason the postmodern types have been going after me is because I've dared to say that men and women differ in temperament, which, by the way, they do. So...
Which, by the way, they do. Clap, 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 clap. Such a low IQ. Oh my God. It's a cult following. He starts off, and these are charismatic tactics that he's using. He starts off by addressing her question, by overloading her with a bunch of information, right? He's speaking in a way to where it sounds like he's smart, but you can't understand his ideas, and she can't keep up with it. And then she shot back at him that he's trying to categorize, he's categorizing people, and he's saying that there are certain expectations among those people or whatever. And then he's saying, yes, I agree, but the postmodernists, and then, the postmodernists, which I guess is feminism, apparently, is that they're saying that, people in the categories don't act the same at all, but people in categories don't act the same as each other, except for the fact that they're all oppressed, which is a typical feminist argument, because feminism and I guess postmodernism now, or whatever, I don't know, is all about oppression. You sometimes hear about that on the internet. They'll be like, oh yeah, everybody's oppressed by the patriarchy, or everyone's oppressed by, white people or whatever, right? Minorities are oppressed, and minorities are, have it tough or whatever, and everyone is racist against minorities, right? And everyone's racist and sexist, and if a white guy and a black guy apply for a job and they're of equal standing, then the white guy will get it 100%, or if a guy and a girl go for a job, then the guy will get it 100%. And if a guy and a girl are, working the same position, then the guy is going to make more money than the girl is, and, all this sort of stuff. So that's basically the oppression that he's speaking of, is the fact that they are oppressed, is the fact that they, minorities, and, so that's races, so like blacks and Latinos and, I guess Asians and women are at an inherent disadvantage in society because everything is catered towards the white male. So he's basically saying, that's what the postmodernists believe, I guess, he's basically saying that that postmodernists don't recognize that certain groups of people behave in a certain way collectively. That, you know, most women act this way, or most black guys act this way, or black people act this way, or most Asians act this way, or whatever, right? He's saying that he is saying that he believes that categories of people have similar characteristics to each other. They're not all the same, but they have similarities, right? Just as in, you know, every person with black skin also does this, you know, the majority of them, or every woman out there is like this or whatever, right? And obviously it's not every person, and I'm sure he doesn't make the argument that it's every person, but he's making the argument that the majority of the people in a specific category are a certain way or whatever. And he brings up the whole, like, that men and women have different temperaments, and he said, which they do, and then everyone claps, which is the most idiotic thing I've ever seen, because it's so stupid. Yeah. For the average person, for the average person, you know, men are gonna get more angry than women, or men get ticked off more easily than women, or whatever, right? You could make that argument. And if you take the collective stats of every guy and the collective stats of every girl, and see, like, oh, which of them gets angry, or how many of them get angry, or whatever, right? Or how easily do they get angry, or whatever, right? That's temperament. Then it would probably say, like, yeah, more guys are more angry than the girls are. Like, congratulations. But that's on a general sense. So that's on a general sense. There are plenty of guys who just don't get angry, and there are plenty of women who are just absolute bitches. So it's not, just because you are a guy shouldn't mean that you are assumed to have a short temper. And just because you are a girl shouldn't mean that you're assumed to never get angry at anything, like, or to not get angry as violently as a guy would, right? So that's sort of the ideology that he's subscribing to, and that I don't necessarily agree with, because I've met many people, or I've seen many people in every single category who don't act like their category. I've seen Hispanics who aren't loud and who are actually reserved and quiet. I've seen Asians who aren't smart or aren't good at math, right? They're actually dumb, or they're just not a numbers person, right? Maybe they're a writer, right? I've seen plenty of black guys who are also reserved, right? They don't act like monkeys or whatever, right? It's like those guys are actually respectable. They're the kind of black guys who just stay in their room and play video games all day, or watch anime all day, or whatever, right? And breaks the stereotype, right? Or I've seen girls who don't act girly, and I've seen guys who don't act manly, and so it's like you can't look at a person and just assume what, it's a Hispanic woman, right? You can't just look at a Hispanic woman and assume that she is loud and boisterous, but doesn't have a quick temper, or does have a quick temper, or whatever the stereotype is, right? You can't just assume that, because you don't know who they are as a person. And I don't agree with the whole feminist spiel about how, like, everyone's oppressed, but I also don't agree with Jordan Peterson when he says that certain people act a certain way. because you can't just assume that because there are so many different people out there. You can say that the majority of a group act a certain way on a general sense. That makes sense. The majority of girls, which the majority basically just means a little more than 50%, don't have short tempers. I agree with that. That's probably true. I don't know any stats, but more than half the girls that I've seen are like kind-hearted people. Totally fine. Or not kind-hearted necessarily, but they're not complete bitches, is what I'm saying. So, I mean, even that's a toss-up or whatever. But I've known plenty of guys who aren't aggressive. Right, so to say that like the majority of guys have short tempers or have a different temperament than women do. I've seen a lot of women who get more mad at stuff than the guys do. And I've seen a lot of guys who are more social than the girls are. Stuff like that. So, and he's saying that like, oh, men and women have different temperaments or whatever, right? It's like, that could mean, in the sense that I just described, that's incorrect. But what he could mean is just a variety of things. And the thing is, he can't say that all men, or that even like the majority have a different temperament than the majority. It's kind of a stretch, and I don't think that, it's just they express it in a different way. If a guy gets angry, he gets angry. But if a girl gets angry, she's just annoying. I think that's more of a fair argument to say. So that's a different kind of temper. It's a different way to express your anger. Guys and girls, the majority, express their anger differently than each other. I would agree with that. But that has nothing to do with temperament. The level of anger you feel isn't determined by how much you express it, or in what way you express it. There are a lot of people who would just bottle up their anger. If they're not expressing their anger, do they not feel angry? Who knows? Right? I mean, obviously the answer is no. But who knows how many people are just bottling up their anger? How many girls are out there who put on a smile and act sweet and caring, but inside they just hate everybody? Right? How many guys are kind-hearted and loving, but on the outside they just look mean and they have a frown on their face all the time, and they're big and buff and muscular and everyone avoids them, right? You have no idea, and you can't measure you can't determine what a group of people as a whole is feeling when you can't measure the individual, and you can't measure every individual. You can't go up to every guy and say, oh, what's your level of temperament or whatever. And so to make that sort of blind statement, and I mean, like 200 years ago, he might have been right. But the thing is, people are raised a lot differently these days. Men these days are taught to be more kind, and women these days are taught to express their negative emotions a lot more. And so I definitely think, as far as temperament goes, the roles are being flipped. And so it's a toss-up as to whether or not anything that he says concerning that is right or not, which I don't think it is. But the fact that everyone just claps here because he's like, but it is true, and then everyone fucking claps means that this whole debate is a fucking zoo. Like, this isn't something to be like, this audience isn't something to like be respected or anything. Because they're just all monkeys clapping because their smart leader said something funny, or whatever, or said something agreeable or whatever, right? And he basically cued them to do that because because the way that he expressed it, he gave the example, and then he paused for a second. He said which, and then he turned his head, changed his facial expression, and then enunciated the fact that they do, which means that he was projecting an idea, and he was intentionally telegraphing the fact that he was expressing an idea that should be agreed with, that he is confident about. And of course all of his fucking followers are gonna laugh and agree with it because their god Jordan Peterson said something that sounds true. So, which is why this is a whole fucking zoo and all these people are animals. In my opinion, it's not. There's a difference between simply agreeing with someone versus just following them with your brain turned off. And all these people are following Jordan Peterson with their brains turned off, right? Because they're not actually willing to sit here and debate about, oh, wait, what he said isn't technically true, or whatever. They're just gonna laugh and clap or whatever, right? It's the same kind of criticism that Trump supporters got back in 2016. That they were all just brain dead followers or whatever. That were just like blindly captivated by Trump's charisma. It's yeah. It's the same level of like closed-mindedness, or not closed-mindedness, but like in-group attitude or whatever, right? Everything that Jordan Peterson says to these, is correct to these people. So that's why. And then you look at the fucking comments. Like, we're only 2 minutes into this. I don't understand why this guy is so vilified. Everything he says seems pretty simple, straightforward, and obvious. He discusses data, not opinions. He just gave an opinion, and his first answer to her was not straightforward and simple. Men and women are different because they have different body parts. But and yeah, sure, they act differently. On a general sense. I'll agree with that. But as far as the specifics as to what they act differently on is a real toss-up. You can't just point out if he said something like men and women are inherently different, then fine. That's an agreeable statement. But God. And just the way that he presents it too is so fucking, I don't know. He's starting to tick me off because he's so fucking
comparative oppression. So I don't understand the first part of your argument. I mean, part of the reason the postmodern types have been going after me is because I've dared to say that men and women differ in temperament, which, by the way, they do. So
yeah, fucking like he's like fucking Josh from Drake and Josh, which, by the way, they do. Like, if I can think about like Josh from Drake and Josh being like, oh yeah, they do, or whatever. I'm sure he fucking says that in the show, and then everyone laughs and there's a fucking laugh track or whatever.
Dared to say that men and women differ in temperament, which, by the way, they do.
They do. It's so idiotic. And the thing is, Josh Peck and Drake and Josh can freaking, like, he plays it like, like he's one of the Three Stooges, like it's a comedy act, which is fine, which is completely acceptable and even a little funny, but
so now, that's actually something that might be worth just differentiating quickly, because it's actually technically somewhat challenging, but also very much worth knowing. I was debating someone on a panel this morning on a TV show.
He's got that nervous tick where he's playing with his wedding ring. He got a dopamine high from the applause, basically. Oh shit. Basically, you know when like when you post a status on Facebook or on Reddit or whatever, and then someone likes it, and then you feel good because you get a notification saying, oh, so and so liked your post, or oh, you got so many upvotes or whatever on Instagram or whatever. That's a dopamine high. You get a little shot of dopamine in your brain, basically. It's that chemical of like joy, but it's like the instant gratification joy or whatever. He got that dopamine shot the instant that in his brain the dopamine chemical really like activated when he got that applause, which is why he stuttered right after the statement and then started fidgeting with his ring in order to get his focus back, because his primitive brain, right, it's in all of our brains, really broke focus or whatever. Whereas if the difference is, I'm not ridiculing him for feeling good because people clapped for him. That's a totally natural human response. But the thing that I'm ridiculing him for is that normally with presenters, when they present something, they have a whole speech planned out start to finish. And so if partway through the speech people clap for the presenter will pause and say, oh, thank you. And then he'll resume his speech because it was already planned. With Jordan Peterson, his response to her question wasn't planned. And the thing is, what he said, or his statement after saying, oh, but they do, or whatever, he didn't have anything after that. He's formulating new ideas on top of themselves. But his train of thought got completely broken by the applause, and he had nothing left. He had nothing to resume his, talking, because he didn't have anything planned, because his response to her question wasn't so elaborate. He was just coming up with it on the spot. If he had more to say after that witty, oh, men and women have different temperaments point, then he would have been able to get himself back on track and say it, right? If he had more of a response to say. But the way that he fidgets and struggles to come up with a response actually suggests that that after that, he didn't have anything else. His response to the whole, oh, postmodernists come after me because I said men and women have different temperaments, that was the end of his thoughts. That was the end of what he was saying or whatever. And basically he said that, but they do, means, the fact that was the end of his thought, which it was because he obviously has nothing planned after this. He was expecting that punchline to cause an applause and in order to give him enough time to form another argument, in order to, formulate another thought to speak or whatever, right? So after this, it doesn't seem like he further really responds to her question towards her. It sounds like he's just like speaking to the audience or continuing his seminar or whatever. Which means that he's breaking focus. And then he's starting to lose track of, like, he's not debating the girl on the balcony. He's just trying to come up with words to say or whatever. Which, I mean, granted, this guy's been in the spotlight for so many years now that he, it's probably hard to public speak or whatever, but it's just that some of the ideas that he says, and especially the way that he presents them and the way that he communicates himself, is more geared towards assembling a cult following behind him, a cult following of people who agree with him, rather than being an actual like public speaker and like getting people to think about ideas or whatever. Because the only people who like Jordan Peterson and who like listen to him are the people who already agreed with him before he even got popular. They're the people who had these opinions but just they didn't clearly have a voice for them. And so now they have a voice for them. And so now they're all following Jordan Peterson because he's able to voice everyone else's opinions, but in a lot smarter of a way, and he's willing to be the leader and the poster boy for this sort of movement. And at that point, that doesn't seem inherently wrong, but at that point it becomes a circle jerk. If you're a public speaker, the whole point is to get people on your side, is to convince with compelling argument that your ideas make sense. So it's to change people's minds. That's the whole point of being a public speaker, is to change people's minds and to present to them information they didn't already have in order to change their minds, right? Someone who's never heard of global warming listens to a global warming public speaker and now is convinced that global warming is a big problem, right? That's the whole purpose. Someone listens to Jordan Peterson, who didn't have any opinion on politics, they're not going to think, oh yeah, Jordan Peterson's correct. No, they're not. They're just going to be confused at his ideas. And then they're going to see a bunch of monkeys surrounding him in a room clapping whenever he says a punchline. That's all you're going to see or whatever, right? It makes it a circle jerk. It makes it a circle jerk, which is why he's gotten all this popularity, and it's why his book sells, and it's why he's able to buy a $2,000 suit that he's wearing right now. But I mean, this man's insanely successful because he's been able to get a cult following or whatever. But then you look at actual cults, and they pretty much do the same thing, right? It's a group of like-minded people who follow a leader, who turn their brains off as the leader, leads them wherever, right? It's the coming of Jesus. It's a Messiah. It's a cult leader. It's a reincarnation. It's a symbol, an icon, an angel, a goddess, or whatever, right? And so it's obviously he's not leading these people to a cliff, to a cliffside to all jump off or whatever, like most of these people do. But he's using the same charismatic tactics in order to sustain his current following of people. And I think it's very interesting because I used to like this guy when he was starting to get popular. I agreed with him, and I guess I was one of the people who liked all his videos and was a follower or whatever. I wasn't brainwashed like these people were, but I thought here's an interesting man, or here's a guy who's saying what should have been spoken about a long time ago, right? And it was fine, and that's how he was in the beginning. But then it's become repetitive at this point. It's been 5 years since then, and he's still doing it, and it's okay. How many times can you listen to the same idea until you get bored of it? For these people, it's going to be the rest of their lives, right? Jordan Peterson's either going to get old and tired of it, or he's going to die from something, and then people are going to be, and then we're going to find a new leader who will say something similar or whatever, right? Ideas stay alive as long as a follower, or as long as a leader is there to carry them. And that's pretty much what Jordan Peterson is. So he'll have this cult following, and they'll be spread out across the internet and whatnot. So, and people will post videos like this where feminists gets owned by Jordan Peterson or whatever on YouTube, and it'll get 5 million views every time. I'm gonna sound like I hate this man. Guys, I gotta be right back. I gotta put beef in the oven. I will be quick this time, I promise. Here. I shouldn't make that kind of promise. We gotta close this. I wanted to play Eternal Black Survival. You know what? You guys can watch the rest of the video. I don't even need to watch the rest of the video, but you guys can watch the rest of the video. Or actually, Peterson, feminist balcony. Feminist destroyed, yeah. Feminist trap, yeah. But yeah, you guys can watch the rest of this video. I'm gonna go put the beef in the oven or whatever.
So I don't understand the first part of your argument. I mean, part of the reason the postmodern types have been going after me is because I've dared to say that men and women differ in temperament, which, by the way, they do. So now, you know, that's actually something that might be worth just differentiating quickly, because it's actually technically somewhat challenging, but also very much worth knowing. I was debating someone on a panel this morning on a TV show, The Right Stuff. And this was a woman who led the Women's Equality Party. And she cited some psychological literature that purported to claim that men and women were mostly the same. And that's actually true. We are more the same than different. If you look at our temperaments, there's more overlap than there is variance by a substantial amount. And so even on the temperamental dimensions where there is most difference between men and women, the difference isn't of massive magnitude at the center of the distribution. So for example, women are less aggressive than men, which is, by the way, why they try to commit suicide more often, but are much less lethal in their actions. That's one example, but there are many examples. If you draw a random woman and a random man out of the population, the probability that the man will be more aggressive is 60%. If you bet on the man, you'd win 60% of the time. That's not a walloping difference. It's not 95% of the time. You know, it's a difference that is substantive, it's significant, it's measurable, but it's not large by the standards by which such things are judged. But that's not the point. The point is that most of the activity takes place at the extremes. So out on the tails of the distribution. So here's an example. About 9 out of 10 people in prison are male. Why? Because to be in prison, you have to be the most aggressive person, let's say in 100. Okay. Those differences at the midpoint are large enough so that if you go out to the extremes, 1 in 100 people, you have an overwhelming preponderance of men. And so you can have your cake and eat it too. You can say, well, yeah, broadly speaking, men and women are more the same than different. The overlap is greater than the disjunction. But that's not relevant if what's being selected is often at the extremes, and it often is. So for example, with regards to engineering, there's a fair bit of evidence that people who are more interested in things than in people become engineers. Now, that's not really going to be, what is that, shocking? Are you shocked by that? You shouldn't be shocked by that, right? You can tell that not only by what engineers do, but you can tell that by how they think, and you can tell that just by talking to them, if you know a bunch of engineers. So, and it turns out that the largest temperamental difference that's known between men and women is actually interest in people versus interest in things. And so it has nothing to do with competence, but it has a lot to do with interest. And because you have to be very interested in things to go be an engineer, because that's all you're going to be doing if you're an engineer, then only those people who are extremely interested in things tend to become engineers. And most of them are men. And that's why even in places like Scandinavia, where a tremendous amount of effort has been put into flattening the sociocultural landscape, and successfully, by the way, there's still a preponderance of male engineers. And there's a preponderance of female nurses. And no matter how much sociological gerrymandering goes on, those statistics have remained quite intractable over about a 15-year period. And so there are differences. They're not massive. And then you might ask, well, are those sociocultural or biological? It's like, well, that's a hard question to answer, because it depends on how much variability there is in the sociocultural landscape, because the proportion by which something is biological versus sociocultural varies with the sociocultural landscape. That's a complicated thing to digest, because you think of those things as fixed, but they're not. So, but what we have demonstrated quite clearly, and this is mainstream science, despite the fact that people don't like it, this test has already been done. So we developed a personality model that's pretty stable across cultures, purely derived from statistical processes, an atheoretical model if there ever was one, and quite an unattractive model because of that, conceptually, but that's beside the point. Then we saw cross-culturally whether there were differences in the fundamental temperaments of men and women, and the answer was yes, cross-culturally, quite robust. Women are higher in the experience of anxiety and emotional pain, and they're more compassionate and agreeable. Those are the big differences, and they're differences of a magnitude that I already pointed out. Then the next question is, well, to what degree is that biological versus sociocultural? And it's complicated because that variable depends on the sociocultural landscape, but we'll put that aside. You can determine that by stacking up countries from those who have done everything they possibly can to flatten out the sociocultural landscape in relationship to gender, to those who haven't, that are still very stratified by sex. And then what you do is you look at the magnitude of the temperament differences in keeping with the variability that those countries have.
The magnitude of the varying differences while keeping within the varying ability. In
terms of their sociocultural egalitarianism.
Yeah.
And
yeah, there's sociocultural egalitarianism.
The sociocultural types, the social constructionists, their prediction is, as cultures become more egalitarian, men and women become more different, more the same, because it's environmental. That isn't what happens. Exactly the opposite.
Stream suspended for policy violations. What do you mean?